Hello and welcome to the Grizz Pen. So today we're going to talk about how to read scholarly articles. Now, doesn't matter what your major is, at some point you will have to read a scholarly article, and it's pretty likely that you'll have to read one that seems long, technical, and confusing. And that can be very scary. So I'm here to give you some tips as to how to effectively and efficiently parse through them. First of all, we need to know what are the elements of a scholarly article. So we're going to have an abstract, an introduction, a methods section, results section, and discussion section. This is not going to be true of every single scholarly article, but this is by far the most common arrangement. So let's take a look about what each of these parts actually are. The abstract is just a very direct summary of everything you need to know about this paper, right? What was the purpose? What was the hypothesis? What were the findings? It's going to be pretty short and very important. This is when you will be able to discard a paper that is not relevant to your research. Then we have an introduction where there's a review of the prior scientific literature of the field, giving you some context, then explaining what is a possible gap in that literature and how this study is trying to fill that gap. Then we have the methods section, where they will explain what was done and how they did it. Then the results, which is just the findings that they made. And lastly, the discussion section, where the implication and meanings of the findings are explained. Now, all of these parts are very important to write a scientific paper, but they are not equally important for you to read a scientific paper. So let's take a look. I divided these into two categories. First, read carefully, and second, scan. So if we read carefully, we're first going to have the abstract. Now, this is going to be pretty easy for you because it's very short and it's only going to take you at most a couple of minutes. The reason why it's so important is because it has all the relevant information about the paper, so you will know immediately whether or not this is a paper that is worth your time and whether or not it's related to the kind of research that you're doing. Then we have the discussion section, which is where the importance and meaning of the results are explained. Now, you might be surprised to see that the results section is not actually in the read carefully category. I'll explain that in a moment. If we go to scan, I mentioned the introduction. There's a lot of information there, but the most important thing that you need to find is what is the problem that this paper is trying to solve. That's going to give you the context necessary to move forward and understand the results. Then you have a methods section. You're going to be looking for things like sample size, measurement tools, and time frames. Lastly, you have the results, where you're going to be looking for p-values, which is just a mathematical certainty that the researchers have in the results. A low p-value means that they're very certain. And then, whether or not the hypothesis was proven or disproven. The reason why the discussion is more important than the results is because the results can be very technical and very scientific and sometimes hard to understand. And the discussion section is where those results will actually be explained. And that's how you will be able to know what they mean. Now, we've talked about the important parts of each of these categories, but why don't we put it in practice? Let's read a scientific paper and try to find the important elements to save some time and be able to actually understand it. If you go to the abstract, you will notice that it opens with the purpose of the study. In this case, the sentence begins, "This study examined." So that's how you're going to know that's a sentence where the purpose of the study is going to be explained. Then they mention sample size and a little bit of methods. That's not always going to be there, but it's pretty common. And lastly, they have the results, which are always going to be there. And very helpfully, the sentence begins, "Results showed." So that's how you know, right? Then, this is not going to be a problem again because abstract is pretty short, so you're just going to read it easily. But these tips are going to be more important in the following sections. Let's take a look. Introduction. Now, you will immediately see that this is a lot longer. But the parts that I'm actually highlighting are pretty short. So we need to know how to find them. In red, we had the prior literature. This is what other scientific researchers have found about this topic in the past. We have the sentence, "Commentators suggest that," so this is prior literature. Then, the problem with the prior literature. Very helpfully, the sentence begins, "Unfortunately," right? I mean, you know that there's going to be a problem. And then we have in green the most important part for you about the introduction. Why their paper is a solution to this problem. And very helpfully, the sentence begins, "Our study addresses this issue by..." So again, that's how you know. So if you just want to scan through the introduction, these are the three important things that you need to find, and that's going to save you a lot of time. Let's move on to the methods section. Again, the methods section is a lot longer, but the things that we actually care about are in red, the sample size, which is going to be super easy to find because it's always going to be a parentheses n equals some number. And that's the number of people who participated in the study. That's what you need to look for. Then the measurement tools, which are very important to know. In this case, it was a questionnaire. And in this case, they mentioned error mitigation. So how they're going to prevent errors from happening in their research. This will not always be there, but if it is, it's a very nice thing to find. Then I think this is the most important part for you to remember. Reading the results section can be very hard, very scientific, and very technical. But if you look at the things that I highlighted, they are all bunched up together. So what am I going to tell you? Look for p-values. In the parentheses, p and a number. Because you will see that next to the p-values are the findings in red, and also the resolution of the hypotheses in green. So if you look for those p-values, everything that is important will be right there. All the text in the middle is usually explanations of the mathematical model that was used to calculate the findings. This is very complicated, and you do not need to know it. So look for the p-values, read around it, and you will get the gist of the results. Lastly, we have the most important section of the whole paper, the discussion. Now, if you didn't even read the results section, it doesn't matter because the results are actually restated right at the beginning of the discussion, as you can see in the red section, which just says we found this and we found that, just restating them. Then the most important part, the meaning / explanation of the results. So why is it so important? Well, let's take a look at the findings. In red, we did find that support for creativity moderated the inverted U-shaped relation between creative time pressure and creativity. Now, I would not blame you if you had no clue what moderated the inverted U-shaped relation means, because I know I don't. So you could very easily read the findings and still don't know what they found. But the yellow section is your best friend. That's what they explain the meaning of the results. That's what they tell you why they matter. That's what they tell you. That's where they tell you what it implies. Once you read that, you will know for sure what they found. And lastly, the relationship between the findings and prior literature. Did they confirm our prior scientific knowledge? Did they find something different that maybe opens the door for further research in the future? So I would repeat, read the whole discussion section very carefully because that's the one that matters the most. And for the rest of them, just remember these tips that I gave you to find the information quickly. And if you ever forget, come back to this video, watch it again. And I will tell you, I think you will be able to save more than 50% of the time that you usually take in reading an article. In the future, if you practice all these tips, you're just gonna read them so quickly, you're gonna be surprised. Now, always feel free to come to the Writing Center if you have any other questions about how to read a scientific article, how to read any scholarly resource, or just anything at all. All right? So I hope to see you there. Thank you for watching.